Hello, my lovely Virgo, and welcome back. I hope you've been taking good care of yourself. Today's reading feels surprisingly emotional because there's someone here who keeps trying to focus on everything else, but somehow their thoughts always circle back to you. So let's settle in together and see where this story wants to go. Okay, right away. This energy feels quiet on the surface. Not quiet because nothing is happening. Quiet because somebody is trying very hard not to show what is happening. Sometimes the loudest emotions come from the people who say the least. And honestly, that's exactly what I'm picking up here. There is someone who keeps telling themselves that they need to be practical. They need to focus on work. They need to focus on responsibilities. They need to focus on everything except you. But the strange thing is, the more they try to redirect their attention, the more their mind seems to drift back toward you. It's almost frustrating them. I keep seeing somebody trying to stay busy, checking off tasks, answering messages, handling obligations, doing all the things they believe they should be doing. Yet somehow your energy keeps finding its way into the spaces between those moments. A memory appears, a thought appears, something reminds them of you, and suddenly they're not thinking about their schedule anymore. They're thinking about a conversation, a smile, a feeling, a moment they can't seem to let go of. And here's the thing. I don't feel like this person wants anyone to know how much space you're taking up in their mind. The hermit is sitting here, and the energy feels incredibly private. This isn't someone broadcasting their feelings to the world. This isn't somebody sitting around talking to all their friends about you every day. If anything, they keep retreating deeper into themselves, almost like they're trying to solve their emotions before anyone notices they exist. But emotions don't always work that way. Sometimes the harder we analyze them, the stronger they become. And I feel like that's exactly what is happening here. Because sitting right beside the hermit is the Eight of Swords. And wow, this person spends a lot of time inside their own head, more than they probably realize. There are moments when they convince themselves they're overthinking, then moments when they convince themselves they're not thinking enough. It's like an endless cycle. One day they tell themselves they need to move on. The next day they're wondering why they still care. One moment will feel completely in control. The next moment something reminds them of you, and all that control starts slipping through their fingers. It's exhausting. Honestly, it feels exhausting, because I don't think they're fighting you. I think they're fighting themselves. They're fighting the fact that their emotions refuse to follow the plan. And what makes this even more interesting is the Four of Pentacles, because this energy feels protective, not possessive, protective, like somebody holding their feelings close to their chest. They aren't ready to expose everything. They aren't ready to say exactly what is on their mind. So instead, they hold on to it. They carry it quietly. They keep it hidden. You know how some people lock important things away because they're afraid of losing them? That's what this feels like emotionally. Part of this person would rather carry these feelings in silence than risk mishandling them. Because underneath all of this control, underneath all of this logic, there is vulnerability, there is uncertainty, and maybe even a little fear. Because what if they acknowledge how much they care? What if they stop pretending? What if they stop creating distance? Then they would have to face something they've been avoiding. The truth. And that's where the moon starts showing up. And honestly, this is where the reading starts getting deeper. Because the moon feels like all the things they haven't fully admitted to themselves yet. Not even the things they hide from other people. The things they hide from themselves. The late night thoughts. The unanswered questions. The moments when they suddenly miss you for no reason they can explain. The strange pull they feel whenever your energy crosses their mind. It's almost like part of them keeps wandering back to the same emotional place over and over again, trying to understand why. Trying to figure out what this connection means to them. Trying to understand why they still care when they thought they had already created enough distance. And what's fascinating is that every attempt to create distance seems to bring them right back to where they started. Back to wondering about you, back to remembering you, back to feeling something they cannot easily label. Because this isn't just about attraction. This isn't just about curiosity. This feels personal, much more personal than they're comfortable admitting. And I keep feeling like they're standing at the edge of an emotional realization, not rushing toward it, not running away from it, just standing there, watching it, thinking about it, trying to decide what to do with everything they've been carrying for so long. Because the more they sit with these thoughts, the harder it becomes to pretend that nothing is there. And honestly, I think that's where this story starts becoming very interesting. Because the more I sit with this energy, the more it feels like this person has developed these quiet little rituals around you. Not rituals that anybody else would notice. not things they would openly admit. Just small moments that have somehow become part of their routine. You know, checking something they probably don't need to check. Looking at something they already saw yesterday. Pausing on a picture longer than they intended to. Telling themselves it's meaningless when deep down they know it isn't. And honestly, that's where the Page of Cups starts showing up for me. Because this energy feels surprisingly soft. Much softer than the walls they've been trying to build. There is a curiosity here, a tenderness. Almost like every time they come across your image, your name, your presence online, something inside them relaxes for a moment. Not because all their questions disappear. Not because everything suddenly makes sense. But because seeing you reminds them of a feeling they haven't been able to replace. And I keep getting this image of somebody scrolling. Maybe late at night. Maybe during a break at work. Maybe during one of those moments when they're supposed to be focused on something completely different. Then suddenly, there you are. A photo. A post, a memory, a glimpse of your life, and for a second, everything else fades into the background. What's interesting is that I don't even feel like they're always looking for something specific. Sometimes they're simply looking. Sometimes they just want to know you're okay. Sometimes they want reassurance that you're still out there living your life. Sometimes they don't even realize what they're searching for until they've already found themselves staring at your picture again. And the strange thing is, I don't feel panic when they see you. I feel peace, a very quiet kind of peace, the kind that catches someone off guard. Because this person may have spent so much time trying to manage their emotions that they've forgotten what genuine comfort feels like. Yet whenever your energy appears in front of them, that comfort seems to return, even if only for a few moments, even if only through a screen. The Six of Cups is sitting here now, and honestly, this feels familiar. Not familiar because they've known you forever. Familiar because your energy feels safe to them, like a place they keep revisiting in their mind. You know how certain songs can transport you back to a specific memory? That's what your energy feels like for this person. They don't always intend to revisit those memories, but somehow they end up there anyway. A conversation comes back, a laugh, a moment they weren't expecting to remember, a detail that should have faded by now but somehow hasn't. And I think that's what surprises them the most. Because they're realizing that time hasn't erased nearly as much as they thought it would. Certain people leave an impression, and your impression seems to linger in ways they didn't anticipate. The star is coming through very strongly as well, and honestly, you may not fully realize how this person sees you, because when they're looking at you, they aren't only seeing your appearance. They're seeing possibility. They're seeing qualities they admire. They're seeing something that inspires them. There is something about the way you carry yourself that stands out. Maybe it's your resilience. Maybe it's your authenticity. Maybe it's the way you keep moving forward through your own challenges. Whatever it is, they notice it, probably more than you think. And there are moments when they compare themselves to you, not out of jealousy, more out of admiration, almost asking themselves questions like, how do they stay so strong? How do they keep going? How do they make it look so effortless? Of course, what they don't realize is that everybody has struggles. Everybody has moments nobody sees. But from where they're standing, you look like somebody who has figured out something they're still trying to understand. And that's part of why they're drawn towards you. Not because they think you're perfect, because they don't, but because there's something genuine about you that feels rare. And the more they observe that, the harder it becomes to dismiss what they're feeling. Because underneath all of this sits the Ace of Cups. And wow, this energy feels emotional, not dramatic. Not chaotic, just emotional, like feelings that have been quietly growing beneath the surface. Feelings that don't always announce themselves loudly. Feelings that reveal themselves through little things. The extra glance, the curiosity. The way someone's attention keeps returning to the same person over and over again. The way they find comfort in your presence without fully understanding why. And honestly, I think that's part of what has them so conflicted. Because these emotions aren't arriving with a clear set of instructions. They're arriving through memories, through observations, through those unexpected pauses when they catch themselves thinking about you again. It's almost like they're beginning to realize that you've become woven into their daily life in ways they never planned for. Not physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically. You're showing up in places where they thought they had complete control. And the more they notice that, the harder it becomes to pretend you're just another passing thought. Because something tells me they're starting to understand that this connection has been quietly growing roots beneath the surface for much longer than they originally believed. And I think that's exactly why this energy starts feeling heavier here. Because once somebody realizes their feelings are real, they usually have to face another question. What if they waited too long? That question keeps echoing through this reading. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just sitting there in the background like a thought they can't quite silence. And honestly, the Nine of Swords feels exhausted. Not because something terrible has happened. Because this person keeps replaying possibilities inside their own mind. You know how sometimes people create entire conversations before they ever happen? They imagine every response, every reaction, every outcome. Then they convince themselves those imagined outcomes are real. That's what this feels like. This person spends a lot of time thinking about things they never said, words they held back, moments they let pass, opportunities they assumed would still be there later. And now they're looking back at some of those moments differently. Because hindsight has a way of changing everything. Something that once felt insignificant suddenly feels important. A choice that seemed harmless suddenly feels meaningful. And what's interesting is that this person doesn't appear worried about whether their feelings exist. I think they already know they do. What keeps them awake is wondering what happened while they were busy trying to figure everything out. Because life doesn't pause while somebody is overthinking. Life keeps moving. People keep growing. Circumstances keep changing. And I feel like this person has become very aware of that lately. They wonder about your life. They wonder about your choices. They wonder about the people around you. They wonder whether somebody else has already noticed everything they've been too afraid to acknowledge. And honestly, that thought seems to bother them more than they want to admit. Because sitting here beside all of this is the Five of Cups. And wow, there is regret here. Not overwhelming regret. Not self-punishment. Just that quiet ache that appears when somebody realizes they could have handled something differently. I keep hearing someone say, I should have said something. Not necessarily a grand confession. Not necessarily some huge emotional speech. Just something, anything. A little more honesty. A little more courage. A little more vulnerability. Because now they're realizing how many emotions have remained trapped inside them. And the strange thing is, I don't think they blame you. This energy doesn't feel angry. It doesn't feel resentful. It feels reflective. Like somebody sitting alone with their own thoughts and recognizing their role in the situation. Recognizing the moments when fear spoke louder than their heart. Recognizing the times they convinced themselves there would always be another opportunity. And maybe there still is, but uncertainty is exactly what keeps them stuck, because they don't know. And people who like certainty struggle when they don't know. Justice is coming through now. And honestly, this feels deeply personal. Because this person keeps weighing things, back and forth, almost like they're holding an invisible scale in their mind. One side carries their fears. The other side carries their feelings. One side says, stay safe. The other side says, be honest. One side says, protect yourself. The other side says, maybe you've already spent too much time protecting yourself. And I think that's where a lot of their internal conflict lives. Because this isn't somebody who wants to act recklessly. They want to feel certain. They want proof. They want reassurance. They want some kind of guarantee before taking emotional risks. But life rarely works that way. Especially when feelings are involved. There is always some uncertainty. There is always some vulnerability. And I think part of them knows that. They're just struggling to make peace with it, you know? Some people are afraid of rejection. Others are afraid of regret. This person seems caught somewhere between both, because they fear disappointment. But they're also beginning to fear what happens if they stay silent forever. And honestly, that's a difficult place to sit emotionally, because neither option feels comfortable. Neither option feels completely safe. And that's where the Two of Swords starts appearing. Not as a decision, as avoidance, at least for now. It's almost like they're standing in front of two roads but refusing to look directly at either one, because looking means choosing. Choosing means responsibility. Responsibility means accepting whatever comes afterward. So instead, they stay suspended, thinking, analyzing, waiting, questioning. But here's what keeps standing out to me. The longer they stay in this space, the harder it becomes to ignore what they're feeling. Because emotions don't disappear simply because somebody postpones a decision. If anything, they tend to become more noticeable, especially when they are connected to somebody who continues occupying so much space in their thoughts. And I keep feeling moments where this person catches themselves unexpectedly. Maybe they're driving. Maybe they're working. Maybe they're talking to somebody else entirely. Then suddenly your name enters their mind, or your face, or a memory. And for a second, everything else fades away. Not because they're trying to think about you. Because it happens naturally, almost instinctively. And that's what seems to unsettle them. The realization that, despite all their efforts to remain logical, Despite all the time that has passed, despite all the reasons they've given themselves, part of them is still emotionally invested. Part of them is still paying attention. Part of them is still wondering what might happen if they stopped standing at the crossroads and finally allowed themselves to see what has been sitting in front of them all along. And honestly, I think that's the moment where something begins shifting inside of them. Not because all their questions suddenly disappear, not because all their fears magically fade away, but because they're getting tired of arguing with what they already know. You know, there comes a point when a person can only analyze something for so long before they have to admit that their heart keeps returning to the same place for a reason. And that's exactly how this energy feels. The more I sit with it, the more I feel someone having a very quiet conversation with themselves. The kind of conversation nobody else hears. The kind that happens during long drives, sleepless mornings, or those moments when life finally becomes quiet enough to hear your own thoughts. And judgment is sitting here, not loudly, not dramatically, just present, like a realization that refuses to leave. I keep hearing someone say, maybe I've been looking at this the wrong way. Because for so long, they were focused on everything that could go wrong. Every possible complication, every uncertainty, every reason to hesitate, every reason to stay where they were. But now something feels different. Now they're starting to question the fear itself. They're starting to question whether fear has actually been protecting them or limiting them. And honestly, that's a difficult thing to admit. Because nobody likes realizing that the thing they trusted most may have been holding them back. What's interesting is that I don't feel this awakening arriving through some massive event. It feels gradual, like sunlight slowly entering a room, one thought at a time, one realization at a time, one honest moment at a time. Because I think they're beginning to see you more clearly now, not through the lens of anxiety, not through the lens of what-if scenarios, but through the lens of what actually exists. And what they keep seeing is consistency, genuineness, a sense of stability. The Hierophant keeps appearing here, and I can't ignore how calm this energy feels. Because when they think about you, they're not thinking about chaos. They're not thinking about drama. They're not thinking about games. They're thinking about someone who feels real, someone who feels grounded, someone who says what they mean, someone who stands by what they believe. And honestly, that matters more to them than they may have realized before. Because the older people get, the less interested they become in confusion, the less interested they become in uncertainty. And I feel like this person is starting to recognize how rare sincerity actually is. Maybe they have dealt with people who sent mixed signals. Maybe they've dealt with situations that felt unstable. Maybe they've spent years navigating relationships where they never knew where they stood. But your energy doesn't feel like that to them. Your energy feels clear. And clarity can be intimidating when someone has spent a long time hiding inside uncertainty. Because clarity asks for honesty. Clarity asks for action. Clarity asks people to stop pretending they don't care. And honestly, that's where strength starts showing up. Not as confidence, not yet. More like courage being built little by little. Because people often think courage means not being afraid. But that's not what I'm seeing here. I'm seeing somebody who is afraid. Somebody who still has doubts. Somebody who still feels vulnerable. Yet at the same time, they're beginning to understand that fear doesn't automatically mean stop. And that's huge. Because for a very long time, every fear they felt became a reason to retreat, a reason to wait, a reason to postpone, a reason to stay silent. Now those fears are being viewed differently. Now they're asking themselves, what if I've been giving my fears too much authority? And honestly, that question alone changes everything. Because the moment somebody starts questioning fear, they also start questioning the walls fear built around them. I keep feeling somebody becoming aware of their own patterns, aware of the excuses, aware of the delays, aware of the stories they've been telling themselves, not judging themselves for it, just seeing it clearly. And clarity can be incredibly powerful, especially when it arrives after a long period of confusion. Then we have the Ace of Pentacles sitting here, and wow, this energy feels surprisingly tangible, because for the first time in a while, I don't feel this person living entirely inside their imagination. I don't feel them trapped inside endless analysis. I don't feel them drifting through possibilities. I feel them noticing reality, the actual connection, the actual person, the actual opportunity sitting in front of them. Because sometimes people become so focused on what could happen that they stop paying attention to what is happening. And I think they're beginning to recognize that. They're realizing that some opportunities deserve more than observation. Some opportunities deserve presence, attention, effort. And I keep getting the sense that someone around them may be helping them see this. Maybe a friend, maybe a family member, maybe someone they trust. Somebody who isn't feeding their fears, somebody who isn't encouraging hesitation, somebody who keeps saying, you already know how you feel. And honestly, sometimes that's exactly what people need. Not more analysis, not more theories, not more time, just somebody gently holding up a mirror, because this person has spent so much time looking at the situation from every possible angle. Yet the answer keeps bringing them back to the same place, back to the same person, back to the same emotions, back to the same truth they've been circling around for longer than they'd probably like to admit. And I can't help but feel that they're standing closer to that truth than ever before, not rushing toward it, not forcing it, just finally allowing themselves to look directly at it without immediately looking away. And honestly, that alone feels like a much bigger change than they're ready to give themselves credit for. And honestly, that's where this energy starts feeling impossible to ignore. Because there comes a moment when somebody realizes that all the thinking, all the analyzing, all the waiting has brought them right back to the same place, right back to the same feelings, right back to the same person. And what I'm noticing here is that this person doesn't seem interested in carrying everything alone anymore. For a long time, they were trying to manage it privately, trying to sort through it internally, trying to convince themselves that if they just thought about it long enough, eventually everything would make sense. But feelings don't always become clearer through isolation. Sometimes they become heavier. Sometimes they become louder. Sometimes they become impossible to carry without saying something. And that's exactly what the Eight of Wands feels like here. Not action, not yet. More like pressure building, like words sitting just beneath the surface. Like conversations they've already rehearsed 100 times inside their mind. You know, I keep seeing somebody imagining how a conversation might go, starting it one way, then changing it, trying another version, then changing that too. It's almost like they're searching for the perfect words, the perfect opening, the perfect way to explain something they've been feeling for a long time. And honestly, I don't think the challenge is that they don't know what they feel. I think the challenge is that they care enough to worry about saying it wrong. Because this doesn't feel casual. This feels important to them. And whenever something matters, people tend to overthink it. They start editing themselves before they've even spoken. They start questioning every sentence before it's left their mouth. And I keep feeling that energy around this person. They're imagining your reaction. They're imagining your response. They're imagining what happens afterward. Not because they're negative, because they're invested. And when somebody becomes emotionally invested, uncertainty suddenly feels much bigger. What's interesting is that the fear doesn't seem quite as powerful anymore. It's still there, but it doesn't seem to be in control the way it used to be. Because sitting right beside this energy is the Fool. And honestly, this feels less like recklessness and more like surrender. Not surrendering to another person, surrendering to honesty, surrendering to authenticity, surrendering to the possibility that maybe not everything can be planned in advance. Because I think this person has spent a very long time trying to predict every outcome before taking a single step. And life doesn't always offer that luxury. Sometimes you only discover what is possible by allowing yourself to be seen, by allowing yourself to speak, by allowing yourself to stop hiding behind uncertainty. And I keep hearing this quiet realization inside them. Something like, I may never feel completely ready, and honestly, that realization changes people. Because there are moments when waiting for perfect certainty becomes another way of avoiding vulnerability. And I think they're beginning to understand that. They're beginning to understand that courage isn't something that arrives after fear disappears. Sometimes courage arrives while fear is still sitting in the room. You just stop letting fear make every decision. And wow, the Ace of Cups feels incredibly emotional here. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just honest, very honest. Because beneath all the overthinking, beneath all the hesitation, beneath all the delays, there is affection, there is care, there is tenderness. There are emotions that have remained alive despite all the reasons they gave themselves to move on. And honestly, that's what keeps bringing them back. Not obsession, not fantasy. Something much simpler than that. Connection. I keep feeling somebody realizing that no matter how many distractions they surrounded themselves with, your energy continued showing up. Not because they were trying to force it, because it was already there, quietly existing beneath everything else. And the more they acknowledge that, the less interested they become in pretending otherwise. Because pretending takes energy. And I think they're getting tired of pretending. Tired of acting unaffected. Tired of acting detached. Tired of acting like they don't care. Especially when their heart keeps leading them in the opposite direction. Then we have Judgment appearing again. And wow, this card feels very different here than it did before. Before, it felt like awareness. Now it feels personal. Because I think they're starting to see themselves more clearly too. Not just the connection. Themselves, their habits, their fears, their excuses, their defenses. The things they use to justify their silence. And honestly, there is something incredibly powerful about self-awareness. Because once you see something clearly, it becomes much harder to keep hiding from it. And I think that's what is happening. This person is looking at their own story differently. They're realizing that some chapters remained unfinished, not because the feelings weren't there, but because the courage wasn't there. And that's a very different realization. Because feelings can be complicated, but courage is a choice people make again and again, moment by moment. And I keep sensing somebody standing at the edge of that choice. Not forcing themselves, not rushing. Just becoming more honest than they've been before. More honest about what they want. More honest about what they miss. More honest about who keeps appearing in their thoughts when everything else becomes quiet. Because at the end of the day, for all the questions they've asked themselves, for all the doubts they've entertained, for all the reasons they've tried to create distance, their heart keeps bringing them back to the same place. And honestly, I don't think they're questioning that anymore nearly as much as they used to. And honestly, sometimes that's all a connection asks of us. Not immediate answers, not perfect timing, just the willingness to be honest with ourselves about what we're truly feeling. Whatever this person is sorting through right now, it feels like they're learning that some emotions don't disappear simply because we try to ignore them. Some feelings stay with us because there's still something left to understand, something left to acknowledge, or maybe even something left to say. That's all I've got for you for this reading. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I truly appreciate it. If any part of this message resonated with you, take what feels right for your journey and simply leave the rest behind. You all mean a lot to me, and I'm grateful we could share this moment together. Take good care of yourself. Keep trusting your own inner wisdom, and I'll see you in the next reading. Okay, bye for now.